I think if we could now move on to the next slide, please. I think we are now progressing to work stream and FASP updates. And I think the first work stream that we have up for this session is security, where I think David Bernick and JP Hubaux are going to be presenting. So if we could move through to that slide, and if I could invite David and JP to please take over.
Right, hi, this is JP speaking. Well, David is supposed to start. I'm not sure he's on the call actually. Otherwise, I'm trying to I would emulate him in some way. Okay, we can move to the next slide, please. Okay, so that's a good topic, right? So yeah, so if I can briefly elaborate on the first bullet, I indeed expressed in January the fact that I will step down from the data security work stream, and so I understand that the G4GH staff is looking for replacement because I'm going to step down at the end of 2021. Now, in terms of David's contribution, so the work is to further harmonize the AI and the passport specifications in collaboration notably with the DURI work stream. And this is motivated by the fact that it turned out that there are actually multiple diverging interpretations of the spec emerged at some point. And so there is an ongoing discussion to find some convergence. And then on things that are a bit closer to what my own contributions, I'm pleased to report that a consortium comprising research from MIT, Broad, and EPFL, which has solved the fundamental problem that has been addressed by the DSWS, and that I think is really crucial for G4GH, which is the problem of secure, privacy-conscious, federated analytics. So I've put here pointers to the thing that actually you cannot click on the video, but I guess everyone has access to the thing, and I will post them. I will post these links in the chat. So the paper came out yesterday in Nature Communications, and you find there all the details, but it boils down essentially to showing that analysis that can be done, that are now routinely done in clear text in a central way, can actually also be done on data that remain in separate silos, in other words. And we've shown that this really works at scale. And we've provided an example with a GWAS with around 1,800 patients times several millions of variants. And we've shown that actually it works, and we can reproduce the same, if you wish, Manhattan plot. So I would encourage everyone to take a look at these results, because I think this is they're really at the core what, as I mentioned, what G4GH is trying to accomplish, and this is particularly meaningful for international studies. And so these are topics that we have actually been discussing with Elixir and of course with the Swiss Personal Health Network, and we will be happy to hear inputs also from our ethics colleagues and regulation colleagues, and we also have ongoing discussions with the cloud colleagues. That's it. Well, here is David. Okay, David, I try my best. Okay, we can move to the next slide, please.
And I think this is summarizing the security.
Yeah, that's it. Absolutely.
Hi. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you, David.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I only heard the tail end of what JP said, but our goal is to really finalize a lot about the passports in AAI and how that all comes together. That's a really big thrust of what this meeting is going to be about for us. We hope to connect on other topics too, but we have a lot of time devoted to that. We've had a lot of preliminary discussion that's pretty heavy. We're getting close to landing a 1.2 enhancement to the spec, which is really, really important for actual adoption. And then maybe talking about the future of what everything looks like. So that's our real focus during this, and it should cross across tons of other groups. So it's a pretty big focus today, and tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day.
Okay, thanks very much, David. So information there that if anybody is interested in passports, using passports in their project, thinks they may be using passports, checking out the passport session would be a really good thing to do. Okay, so thank you very much to security. I think next up we have discovery. I'm sorry, I have a brief second if we have any questions for security, first of all. Okay, so if in that case, I'm going to invite Marc to start presenting on discovery updates, please.
Thanks, Susan.
Thanks, Marc.
So discovery creates standards for federated discovery of both genomics data and services, with the exception of schema blocks. All of the standards on our roadmap have been approved. That includes service information, registry, data connect, and beacon. The second version of beacon is very close to submission for product approval. Next slide. So the focus for us is really on cross workstream interactions. We're looking at the integration, scale, and expansion of existing standards, and the creation of net new ones in collaboration with other workstreams. So there are 4 sessions, 2 of which are FAST. The other one which we're contributing to is computable cohort and data model library. Who should attend? We're really looking for interactions with prospective implementers of existing standards, so things like Data Connect, Beacon, and FAST. And of course, those who are interested in net new standards development that are a little bit in their infancy. So things like data model library and how we might be able to interact with the computable cohort. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much indeed, Marc. And I guess anybody got any questions for Marc? Okay, and I think, okay. So in that case, next up, we have data use and researcher identities, and we're going to have Sarion presenting this for us. Sarion, would you like to go ahead?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I co-lead the passports work stream. I hope most of you probably know what Jury works on, but for those who don't, the 2 main products are Duo and passports. So Duo is a data usage ontology, and this is basically a way of creating machine readable data usage restriction map. And then we also have the passports, which is around digital identities and authorizations. So this has been, well, the last 2 years have been a pretty busy time for both Duo and passports. We've had some pretty big achievements. I think the biggest thing, and most people are pretty exhausted by it, are the 2 publications that have been submitted to Cell Genomics. We're hoping to hear back this week about whether those final edits have been accepted. We're also working on delivering passports version 1.2. So this is a significant development in passports to look at how we can incorporate visas appropriately. And Duo version 1.0, the translations have been going on for the last couple of years, and we are looking at a data sharing tool for later this year. The main focus of the meeting this time, this Connect meeting, is to really focusing on passports rather than Duo. So we are looking at the integration with other standards, as you are hearing from almost everybody so far. I think we've heard passports mentioned quite a few times. So we are looking at the integration with DIRS and encouraging further implementations. If we can go on to the next slide. Thank you. So we have a workshop tomorrow, which I would encourage absolutely everybody to come to. Workshop is going to be with the data security work stream, and the objective is to update, to provide an update on the changes from version 1.0 to version 1.2. We want to provide some context and background to these updates. It's not a straightforward issue. And we also have been collecting use cases. We would love to hear more use cases, so we will be talking about the progress on collecting those. It's really important for us to get these use cases because they really shape the way that we are developing passports. And most of all, we'd really encourage a discussion from implementers and driver projects. So of course, anybody should attend this, and I would encourage you all, but anybody from any of the work streams who are interested in integrating passports, we'd love to hear from you. We'd particularly love to hear from driver projects who are interested in the passports implementation. And also anybody who perhaps is interested in passports, isn't necessarily a technical person, but is seeing maybe some barriers to implementing, or would just like to know more. We'd actually really love to hear from you, identifying the barriers to implementing passports is one of the biggest topics that we want to focus on in the next year. And with that, I will hand over for questions.
So thanks very much, Sarion, and thank you also for, or congratulations rather, on all the work on those publications that I know have been going on in jury.
Thank you. I have to say, I think most of the work has been done by others, but it's been a huge effort, and so I think it is worth saying thank you to everyone for that.
Yeah, well, we really appreciate it. So I guess any questions for Sarion, and I guess we also had another plug there for the passport session tomorrow. So I think, again, if a really interesting session potentially for people to go along to, and also noting your requests for people to be getting in touch if they have things that they want to do with passports, and so that you can capture use cases, which sounds really, really important. Okay, so I think in that case, I'm not seeing any questions coming in on Slido right now. And I feel like I have given a reasonable length of time for people to type if they have to. I don't know if it's maybe taking a second or two for things to come through.
There's one in the chat.
There's one in chat. I've seen that there is one in chat, but I haven't seen the actual question.
I think it's what's the next product for discovery after schema block for Marc.
Okay, great.
Sorry.
Thank you very much, Sarion, for picking that up. I don't know if we still have Marc, and if Marc would like to answer that just now.
Yeah, sorry, I was typing a long response. We recently took a survey of the work stream, and the team is most interested in improving scaling and serving new use cases with existing standards versus creating net new ones. That being said, we're very open to suggestions.
Okay, thanks very much indeed, Marc. Really appreciate you coming back in there. Okay, so I think that in that case, the next work stream that we have scheduled to give an update, if there are no questions for Sarion, is going to be Genomic Knowledge Standards. And for that, we've got Andy Yates presenting. So Andy, if you are on the call, please.
Yep, I'm on and ready to go. So hi, everyone. Thank you, Susan. If you can pop on to the next slide, please. So I'm presenting on behalf of Genomic Knowledge Standards. If this is your first Connect session ever and you're thinking, what the hell is Genomic Knowledge Standards? Basically, if you think about anything involving standards around consistent interoperable representations of genomic-based knowledge. I know I'm reading straight off the slide there, but basically it's anything that comes under that. And there's a few of the products that we're engaged with there. And to be frankly honest, your input into our sessions over the next few days will alter the structure of our work. We really want to prioritize broader engagement. We are trying to expand the diversity and inclusion of our work stream as well, because we know that this is going to generate far better standards than we have. And perhaps something that has constantly been coming through as well is actually another focus is to try to not make perfect the enemy of good. So to try to speed things up a little bit as well. Okay, next slide, please. So what sessions have we got coming up? The first is variation standards. This is a purposeful joining together of the two standards, verse and variant annotation. So that's variation representation specification and the variation annotation, which will be going through some of the new updates for that, and also some of our ideas around improving our best practice with developing standards. New topics is versatile. That has come up previously, but you may be interested in catching up on where that is, along with variation rule, which is this characterization of variation matching semantics work. Who should attend this? Basically, if you are a variation provider, modeler, consumer, exchanger, anything like that, please come along. I can promise you it will be well worth your while. If we can go to the next slide, please. And then the second major session that we have going up that isn't being run by Large Scale Genomics, because those guys will come onto that in a second, is sequence annotation. This It's a shame that the picture here got replaced, but it's probably the right thing it got replaced. Basically, this is our attempt to come back into a more generalized model for sequence annotation. So genomic components, and one of the main components that we've actually looked at is the transcript model. We are going to present the current transcript model as it stands at the moment. We're going to seek feedback, obviously from yourselves as well. But also we have some plans around some of the control vocabulary, some of the, I'm trying to think of the phrase for this now, and it has completely gone from me, value sets, that's the word I'm looking for, value sets, and some of the relationships that's being developed here. So again, we really encourage broad input into this as well. So please come along to this if you're interested in that. And I think that's the last slide. So any questions at all, please ping them up on Slido or fire them over into the chat, or if you come up with something later on, then just basically reach out to myself or Bob or any of the other GKS leads.
Okay, thanks very much indeed for that, Andy. Hang on a second. We have a question here. How does GKS relate to the data library?
I mean, that's kind of like, Larry, you're not meant to do things like that at me. I believe so I believe there's a natural synergy here between the library, between the concept and the focus of the library and what the GKS standards will be promoted out from that. I fully expect a migration, a inclusion in that, but to be honest, this is something that I also am trying to understand as well, and I look forward to working it out probably with yourself, Larry, as well.
Okay, and I'm guessing that may also be a topic for conversation at the data model library session, which I
completely agree with that.
Would be really great to get some discussion going there on those sorts of topics. Okay, any other questions for Andy? I'm not seeing anything on Slido at the moment, and I'm not seeing anything more in chat. But I think the take home there was that there are at least a couple of different sessions that GKS are running, one variant focused and one looking much more at the sequence annotation and this transcript model. Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for the update, Andy. I think in that case, we will move ahead. So next up, I think we have large-scale genomics, and I believe we have Thomas and Oliver are going to present on what large-scale genomics is going to be doing during the course of the Connect meeting. So Thomas and Oliver, you're on. Please go ahead. Thanks very much, Thomas.
Yep. Hi, Susan. Yeah, I'll get us started, and then Oliver will do the next couple of slides. So I guess we were asked just to do kind of just an overview for anyone who's new to the J4GH and J4GH Connect about what the large scale genomics workstream does. So a lot of the long time people can switch off for a minute. What we do essentially in large scale genomics is we're looking at developing standardized methods for accessing large scale genomic data. So the real kind of bulk data, the read data, the variant data, the real kind of bulk kind of at scale data that's generated by many of the different human genomics initiatives, and of course expression data is in scope as well. We're looking at file-based representations, trying to migrate and move towards API-based access for these bulk data sets, and then of course then trying to integrate how these data sets are accessed in the sort of cloud and federated analysis models. Some of the challenges that we're trying to address, I mean, we're clearly, we have a set of incumbent formats that have been around for many years. They need to be adapted, they need to evolve, they need to continue to scale as new assay types come along, new vendors, I mean, things like single cell technologies, things like long reads, increased scale and throughput for the different assays and platforms. So these standards need to be continually evolved. And I guess the one sort of recent example is we've got a preprint about the CRAM version 3.1 standard and showing how it really compares to some of the other standards for compressing read level data. I think, I mean, we're really trying to push the sort of going from the sort of maybe the 10 years ago sort of approach where everything was file-based and moving towards this more API-based access for the genomics bulk data. Some of the formats we maintain, I mean, all the obvious ones is SAM and BAM and CRAM standards, the VCF and BCF for genetic variation. We've recently have been going through over the summer the process of standardizing the BED format and getting that into a more documented version standard. I think that's going to come up to the steering committee probably in the next steering committee meeting for a vote. The Crypt4GH standard was a standard for creating a sort of an envelope kind of wrapper for encrypting some of these incumbent standards. Some of the APIs we've published over the last couple of years, I mean, the HTS-GET, I think, was one of the first sort of the new batch of standards, I guess, that came around from when through the GA4GH reboot. We've got the RefGet standard, which is a workshop coming up in the next couple of days. You'll hear about that in a second. And the RNA-GET standard is another one of these. I think I was looking back at our roadmap, and I think we have almost completed or very close to fully completing all of our sort of roadmap items we had in the 2020 to 2022. I think the real focus again is, you know, we've published some of these standards. Now it's getting adoption, getting them integrated into pipelines, getting them integrated at different cohort initiatives, infrastructures, and really getting them talking to each other and sort of interoperable in this kind of federated analysis kind of world. And then really we're acting as a bridge between, say, the community implementations of these standards and trying to just encourage, trying to make sure the implementations are up to date, and just trying to keep things, ensure that the tools are sort of are implementing the standards, and that as the specifications get updated, that they're actually compatible and they're not going to cause breakage for the various tool chains. And that probably is, you know, is possibly one of the most challenging sort of aspects for the work stream. All right, next slide. I think Oliver's going to take over with just giving a run through what's coming up in the next couple of days.
I'll try to, if the mic is actually working. It seems to be working. Okay, thank you so much, Thomas. So what we're coming up this is a quick summary. I think large-scale genomics contributors will be present at a number of different sessions that I kind of outlined here. Mostly looking at interoperability for some of our standards, as you mentioned maybe a couple of minutes ago in chat. Like one of the discussion points, for example, would be HTS-GET. How does it interoperate with DRS and passports? But then large-scale genomics is also chairing 3 different sessions that are highlighted here in bold. Next slide, please. The first one is the large-scale genomics infrastructure and specification development processes session. That's chaired by John Marshall, and it's a long title, but I'm actually really excited about that session. It's probably a topic we should have tackled in a previous Connect session a while ago, and it will cover like an overview of the technical procedures that large-scale genomics is using to maintain specifications, use continuous integration approaches to generate documents, and basically how to use other components of the infrastructure, and then followed by discussion around progressing issues, proposals, and pull requests maybe a little bit more reliably and ultimately faster. Basically, the social aspects involved in developing and maintaining standards. We think that's likely of interest not just to large-scale genomics participants, but probably developers and contributors for standards across GA4GH. Some of the processes that the large-scale genomics use might be useful for others, but we're also keen to learn from others. Next slide, please. Second session is the Future VCF working group meeting chaired by Albert Smith. That's a reboot of a previous effort to support population scale variation data. And so the key problem the group is trying to tackle is the superlinear growth of VCFs and how to better represent this information, particularly with regards to transferring variant information between different sites and researchers. This particular session will try to identify use cases or user stories you might have missed previously, make progress on the benchmark data, and decide on next steps and deadlines, at which point we want to start evaluating different technologies. I do think we have fairly good representation from different file formats and tool maintainers, but we're always happy to see more. We'd love to see in particular active participation from more driver projects here, or really any project that is struggling with scaling VCFs. Maybe as a side note, Albert, we're also looking for co-chair for this work stream. And then last slide, please. So finally, the RefGet and sequence collection update meeting. That's going to be chaired, I think, by Andy Yates and Nathan Sheffield. I suspect most of you heard about RefGet by now. It's an API that allows the identification of specifically reference genomic state sequences via a checksum mechanism. And so this RefGet session is meant to provide updates, particularly on sequence connections as a concept, to extend RefGet from single genomic sequences to a collection of sequences such as a genome, for example. And then there's also discussion around how RefKit could be integrated with the previously mentioned file formats to reduce some of the ambiguity when encoding reference sequences, for example, for alignment. If you're working with large-scale genomic file formats, developing tools in that space, or are interested in reproducible science, we'd love to have your input. That's it for now.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Thomas and Oliver. And I guess, does anybody have any questions for Thomas and Oliver about LSG updates or their planned sessions? If you do, please do feel free to put them into Slido or into chat. I guess also just noticing, Oliver, that the first of those 3 sessions that you mentioned, the one about infrastructure, while interesting, I guess, for LSG to compare practices across the different subgroups, that actually a lot of the topics there are likely to be applicable to people in other work streams. And so people from other work streams should feel completely welcome to join that session too, I guess.
Yeah, very much so. This goes for all sessions.
Okay, so I'm going to give it another second or two. Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think in that case, we'll just mention that it's incredibly impressive that you guys have more or less completed everything in your roadmap. So congratulations on that. And we will now look at moving on to the next talk. So I think next up we have the RUSE presentation. And for this, we've got Maili Raven-Adams speaking. So Maili, gonna hand over to you.
Thanks, Susan. Hopefully you can see and hear me.
I'll see you and hear you perfectly.
You can? Thank you. So it's nice to see some of you that I've met before. I'm still relatively new to GA4GH though, so I thought I would just introduce myself. So I'm Maili and I'm the GA4GH policy analyst. So I'm primarily based within RUSE, but I'm also working in wider GA4GH. So I mainly assist RUSE with their work and then try and find, gaps that RUSE and GA4GH might want to pursue in future deliverables. So if anyone has any ideas or wants to talk to me, then feel free to send me an email at some point. Next slide, please. So for those of you that are new to GA4GH, RUSE aims to develop policies and tools addressing the regulatory and ethics hurdles to international genomic data sharing. We've actually completed the majority of our roadmap, so that's really exciting. So we want to use the remainder of our Connect meetings to kind of discuss the future direction of existing work and also possible new projects that we could pursue in the future. Next slide, please. We want to just iterate that everyone is welcome to join any of our Connect meetings from different work streams, driver projects and different backgrounds. It would be great to hear from all of you. And also if RUSE issues come up in your own work, please feel free to get in touch with us and let us know. And obviously if you've got expertise in any of the areas that I talk about in the following slides, then obviously you're more than welcome to join as well. I'd love to hear from you. Next slide, please. So to kick things off, we've got our Genetic Discrimination Observatory meeting tomorrow. So that's at 1 p.m. UTC. And this is a group that's dedicated to researching and preventing discrimination occurring from genetic data. We want to use this meeting to discuss next steps for the ongoing study that they've been doing that's been using the Delphi method, which aims to collate global anti-discrimination clauses with the purpose of eventually creating their own model clause. So we want to use this time to assess this and also the willingness and the need to develop further policy guidance or additional tools related to genetic discrimination for GA4GH. And then directly after that at 2 p.m. UTC, we have our RUSE general meeting. So at the beginning of this, we're going to use the time to vote on some existing deliverables. So we've got our DACRIs, which is the Data Access Committee Review Standards, and also an informational document created by GDOs. We want to vote on these to see if they can go forward to steering committee, and then a vote will happen at steering committee, and that's what's needed for them to become published GA4GH policies. And we also have a vote for our large-scale initiatives consent clauses, which is created by our consent subgroup to move forward to public comment. And then for the remainder of that meeting, we really want to use the time to discuss new projects. So please bring along any ideas that you might have. We'd love to hear what you have to say. And next slide, please. Then later that evening, UK time anyway, so it's 9 p.m. UTC, and we have our DACRIs cross workstream subgroup meeting, which has members from both RUSE and the Data Use and Researcher Identities workstream. So this group aims to create procedural standards for data access reviews and to promote consistency and effectiveness across these data access committees. So the purpose of the meeting is to discuss the finalisation of the policy that's up for vote at RU's General, and also discuss opportunities for its implementation and on what aspects of the policy we might want to build into our planned Jacary's toolkit. Next slide, please. And then on our final day, we have our consent meeting. So that's on 12 p.m. UTC. And the consent subgroup focuses on creating consent toolkits to be used in the genomic sphere. So it covers different areas from genomic research, large scale initiatives, and clinical genetic testing. As the group has completed or is in the process of completing a lot of those, we want to focus on the clinical consent clauses, which hasn't been touched on yet. So we would like to specifically invite lawyers, bioethicists, and also those from a clinical background to help shape the discussion. And then finally, we've got a brand new project on the last day, which I'm particularly excited about, which is on artificial intelligence and bias in genetic research. We want to use this time to try and narrow down the focus of this topic and try and figure out where G4GH could be most useful. And I want to iterate that we want this to be cross work streams. So from any work streams that are interested in this, please come along and get involved. Thank you. I look forward to seeing you in the next few days.
Thank you very much indeed, Maili. That's great. And I guess, does anybody have any questions for Maili? If you do, please feel free to put them into Slido or into chat. And thank you very much indeed, Maili, for that overview of the sessions. Really interested to see the new initiative on AI and bias. I know that machine learning has been becoming more and more prevalent over recent years, but I don't know if it was knowing that this session was coming up, but I suddenly found myself paying attention every time it got mentioned to me in the last couple of weeks, and it came up in a lot of conversations. So I think it's really interesting to see Ruth taking a look at that. It sounds really great. Okay, and any questions for Maili? Okay, well, we do have a question. Will the AI session be recorded?
Yeah, it will be recorded. I think all of the Connect sessions will be recorded. So if you can't make it, you should be able to access it, I think, through the attendee hub afterwards. So don't worry if you can't make it, you can watch it after. And if you've got any questions, then you can send the RU's coordinators a message if you like.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much indeed, Maili. And I guess also actually really useful to reiterate that point. I think it should be the case that all of the working sessions get recorded. As we said at the beginning, it's always a challenge to find times of day that are going to work, and finding times of days that will work for everybody is obviously not always possible. So we do appreciate that it is a substantial commitment to try and get to all of these sessions. So if you can't make it, do please try and catch the recordings, and feel free to follow up with any of us afterwards if you want to get involved or you have any questions. Okay, and thank you again very much, Maili. And I guess next up, I think we have clinical and phenotypic data capture. And I believe we're going to have Katherine Johnston presenting an update on this. Thanks, Katherine.
Hi, everyone. Morning, afternoon, and evening. I'm from the H Africa Driver Project, and so I'm a member involved in the ClinPheno work stream. And I will be relaying these updates and details of the Connect sessions coming up. So just as a reminder of the goals of the ClinPheno work stream, just take a look in the blue box. So the work stream is about bringing genomics into clinical data collection and exchange, making it usable for patient health care and research through the adoption of standard ontologies, best practices, and information models. So just an update on the Phenotypic project. They're happy to announce that version 2 was approved in June 2021. And you can find the schema on the GitHub link. We're hoping this version will remain stable. Work is now shifting towards implementation support, such as converting from version 1 to version 2, and also especially focusing on dissemination of information by raising awareness about the data exchange standard, putting in place webinars and the such. Members are working on a manuscript describing phenopackets, standards, interoperability, and phenotype data exchange in the biomedical ecosystem. We welcome anyone who contributed to phenopackets to submit an authorship declaration. So please get in touch with us via the link to view the draft. Over the past 2 years, we've been bringing phenotype standards through the ISO approval process. And in fact, recently approved version 2 included feedback from ISO contributors. So the ISO version has the exact same content as the GA4GH documentation, that's just formatted differently. The hopefully last ballot for the ISO version was opened at the end of this September, and we will be open for 3 months until the end of December. So assuming no major comments are received, hopefully the ISO version will be published in early 2022. The pedigree standard group is nearing the end of the planned milestones with the implementation demo. Driver projects and other interested groups are testing the pedigree standard and moving family health history data across an ecosystem of tools. This will be presented at the breakout later today, so please do join us. And we'll put some more details about that on the next slide. In addition to the technical model, the group has also developed a family history relationship ontology called Keane and a minimal dataset recommendation, which we hope to approve alongside the technical model. The new computable cohort representation group, chaired by Melanie Cortot and Sushil Varma, is a joint subgroup with the discovery workstream, and it's going to be exploring standardization around cohorts and case discovery. It's still in the early stages of standard development and determining a roadmap and meeting schedule. So starting with the landscape analysis of the standards, APIs, models, etc., being used in cohorts and case discovery. They're hoping to propose a standard at the upcoming steering committee. Next slide. So, sorry, slide ahead. We've jumped a slide. Thanks. These are the upcoming ClinPheno sessions available at Connect, and so we really encourage folks to attend. The pedigree standard group, as I mentioned before, will be demoing an implementation of its standard today at 10:30 p.m. UTC time. And so really encourage you to attend. I'm going to be setting my alarm for midnight. And since the subgroup is nearing the end of the milestones, it's a critical point for feedback to move forward with a product approval. So we'd like to welcome those with experience collecting, sharing, analyze family health history data, and even those interested in phenotype variant information, because we see that pedigree, phenopackets, and variant annotation representation standards working in concert for genomic interpretation. On the 13th of October, at 12 p.m. UTC time, the computable cohort representation group will be sharing a summary of discussions to date. And so they really invite the community to provide feedback on the development of a roadmap and work schedule. This is an opportunity to learn more about this new effort and become involved right from the start. The ClinPheno Driver Project Roundtable Update session will be happening on the 14th of October, 9 p.m. UTC time. And it may be very late or early for some attendees, but we'd like to build a collaborative and representative community across the GA4GH network to ensure that future deliverables respond to needs. This is an opportunity to learn about community efforts, what driver projects are up to in clinical data standardization, representation, and exchange. So it's a time to share and exchange experiences and knowledge in this area. So we hope to see you at some of these events. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Katherine. And I guess, does anybody have any questions for Katherine about either the ClinPheno updates or the planned sessions? It sounds like there's been lots of progress there, Katherine, and I guess, yeah, more congratulations, because it sounds like there's great progress in phenopackets, both the collaboration with ISO and also on moving ahead with that publication, and lots of exciting sounding sessions planned for this meeting. So at the moment, I'm not seeing any questions in Slido or in chat. I'm going to give it a little second. And I guess the take home there, Katherine, was that there are these 3 sessions, and that in particular for some of the new initiatives, and that if there were people who have match up to some of those particular interests, they would be really, really welcome to come along and get involved in those projects.
Yeah, certainly.
Oh, that sounds brilliant. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any further questions. I am seeing enthusiasm, but I'm not seeing questions. So with that, I think we're going to move on now, and I think next up we should have the cloud workstream updates, and I believe that's going to be presented by Brian. So Brian, if you're on, over to you.
Thanks, Susan. Hi, everyone. I'm Brian O'Connor. I co-lead the cloud workstream with David Glazer. If you could go to the next slide. Great, thanks. So for those of you that are less familiar with the cloud workstream, we're focused on creating specific standards for defining, sharing, and executing portable workflows, and also accessing data in cloud and other environments in an environment agnostic way. The 4 APIs that we've created over the years, they've all been approved as GA4GH standards, which is awesome. And these include the tool registry service, or TERS. This is our service that allows for the sort of portable, findable, interoperable, accessible, and reproducible sharing of tools and workflows. And in the future, we hope other entities like interactive apps or notebooks. This has been released and in use by a lot of different projects over the years. The next one is the Workflow Execution Service, or WES. This is all about sending compute to where the data resides. So being able to send a workflow or a tool to a remote location and actually compute on the data in that environment. The third API is a little bit lower level. This is TESS, or Task Execution Service. And this is very useful for workflow engine builders and other operations that do sort of individual step executions in a particular environment. And finally, DRS, or Data Repository Service. This allows us to access genomic data or other data types across a variety of cloud and other environment storage platforms. So DRS in particular is the API that we just had our latest release on. DRS 1.2 came out in time for plenary, and that actually includes clear specifications on how to use passports with DRS for the first time, which is really exciting. And I'm also happy to say too that DRS is actually experiencing, over the last year, we've seen a lot of adoption of DRS, which has been great. The NIH projects I work on right now, for example, have made over 11 petabytes of data accessible over DRS. So all in all, really happy to see the adoption across the board for these APIs over the last year. But things move on, and we want to continue to evolve these APIs and get that key feedback that we've received from driver projects and other implementers and researchers, and roll those changes into new versions of these APIs. So there are a lot of non-breaking changes in the works that improve interoperability and the sort of researcher experience with our 4 APIs. At Connect, what we're really trying to do is look at establishing the next steps to get these changes into our APIs and released to the larger community in 2022. So next slide, I'll tell you a little bit about what our process is going to be for doing that. Thanks. So then at the Connect meeting, what we're doing is step 1, we're prioritizing our API spec enhancements for the next year. And this is really based on feedback from the drivers, feedback from implementers, feedback from researchers that are contributors to the cloud workstream and other work streams. The second step that we want to take during our breakout is to really take these high importance, high profile tickets and make sure that we have champions that can take those tickets through the process of communication with the community, translating them into pull requests, into proposed changes, and landing those pull requests in new releases. And then the final thing that we want to do is translate that work into our shared understanding, our shared roadmap for the next year of work. So that at the high level is what we're trying to accomplish. We're going to be working in several different breakouts throughout the Connect meeting. Obviously, the cloud work stream, we're going to be focused on those 3 goals. We want drivers to attend, implementers to attend, researchers that are interested in using cloud APIs and contributing feedback back to the APIs. These are the sort of folks that we're hoping attend our cloud session. There are other sessions, though, that cloud is going to be very involved with, including the FAST session, which happens just after the cloud session later today. And this is really an awesome opportunity for us to hear feedback on our APIs from real world use cases and demos. And I have to say, over the last year, FAST has been an awesome source of information for the cloud workstream, in particular, being able to land how we use passports and DERS together. FAST has really been instrumental in seeing real world examples of how that can work and how that should work. So we're looking forward to continued engagement on our APIs and FAST, but also continuing to see the collection of use cases and future demo plans worked on in that session as well, and exploring how things like FAST scripts and the starter kit can expand and be used by more people. There's a third session that I think is really interesting for Cloud Workstream, and that is Data Connect plus Cloud. This is happening on the 13th. And this is really intentionally, the Cloud Workstream APIs are focused on compute and data access and not necessarily search and discovery. Data Connect is really our mechanism to find data as inputs to workflows and data access. So we're really interested in looking at the relationship between search and Data Connect and the discovery workstream and cloud, because they very much complement each other from a researcher perspective and researcher experience. And then finally, on the 14th, there's the security workshop. We're really interested in how the cloud APIs can be leveraged and expanded to conduct federated and secure analysis across systems. So we're really looking forward to seeing what next steps can happen in our APIs, what changes might be prioritized for the next year in order to support that vision. And so with that, I think I've covered the slides. If there are any questions, David and I are happy to answer.
Thank you very much indeed, Brian. And as Brian said, if you do have questions, either about any of the cloud updates or about the sessions that are planned for this meeting, please feel free to put those either into Slido or into chat. And I think, Brian, it was really interesting there hearing about your goals and plans for this meeting. Also looking a little bit actually at the processes by which cloud uses, or sorry, the processes that cloud uses in standards development. And again, kind of reminding me a little bit of the session. I know it's sponsored by LSG on standards development processes, but the idea of having champions and so on sounds potentially interesting for lots of different work streams to look at. And also really interesting at hearing how productive you found your collaboration with FASP and driver projects. I know that as one of our FASP co-leads, you may potentially be biased there, but
I'm biased a little bit, but yeah. But it has been incredibly useful to actually see those real world use cases and get that feedback from people using these APIs together. It's been really amazing.
Okay. Okay. In that case, I'm not seeing any questions here coming up in Slido. So in that case, I'm just going to say thank you very much to Brian, David, and everybody else in Cloud for all the work, and looking forward to seeing some of those sessions. I'm certainly hoping to join some of those ones. And perfectly then, I guess to FASP, our Federated Analysis Systems project. And Max, if you are on, I'm happy to hand over to you to hear about what FASP has been doing and what you're going to be doing at Connect.
All right, thanks, Susan. If we can go to the next slide, please. So the Federated Analysis Systems project, for people who haven't attended our meetings, we're a cross workstream effort that promotes interoperability between GA4GH standards. We do this by trying to identify real scientific use cases and then identifying the gaps or the obstacles that driver projects or implementers have trying to solve these use cases. And I think our primary job is taking all this feedback and then establishing a feedback cycle where we can bring this back to work streams like cloud or DURI or security. If we can go to the next slide. So how did we do this? Two of our most powerful tools are hackathons and demonstrations. So we organize, over the last year, we ran 2 hackathons where we brought people together to work on working software in the form of fast scripts, or to work on documents describing, potential solutions to API integration problems. And we've also had some working demonstrations, and together we take all of the things we learned from these efforts, and we bring this feedback back to driver projects and the work streams. If we can go to the next slide, please. In terms of demonstrations, we have sort of 2 flavors of demos that we've shown over the past couple of years. One of them is a vertical demo where we combine several different standards throughout a single technology stack, and we show them solving an entire use case. We have a video that we showed clips of at the plenary this year, and there's a link for that I can share in the chat afterwards. And if we go to the next slide, our other demo sorry, if we can go to the next slide, please. So the other kind of demo we show is our horizontal demo, where we try to combine implementations across different projects and implementers, and try and show a real use case of how someone can take data sometimes in real systems using fast scripts and do some sort of useful analysis. If we can go to the next slide, which I believe is the last one. So our goals for FAST but Connect this year, we're looking to identify a new set of use cases involving GA4GH standards that we can explore over the next year. And we're also actively looking to get more driver projects and implementers involved. So we're looking for new opportunities to bring more people into participating in these demos. So we have 2 meetings where we'll be trying to achieve these goals that have been mentioned previously, but our first FASP update meeting is happening from my perspective later today. And we'll be discussing current use case and trying to collect new use cases from attendees. And we'll also be exploring new demo opportunities over the next year with things like fast scripts, the starter kit, and potentially some ideas around setting up test beds. We also have the Data Connect and Cloud focused FAST meeting. There's a typo on the slide. It's October 13th. So it's 24 hours after our first meeting, but it's going to be similar in sort of the goals, but we'll be focusing particularly on integration scenarios between cloud and discovery APIs and identifying new demo opportunities there. And that with that, I'll wrap up and open it up to any questions.
So thank you very much indeed, Max, for that update. And if anybody does have any questions, and please do feel free as ever to put them into Slido or to put them into chat. And I think, Max, really interesting to hear about the work that FASP has been doing. Clearly, there's been a lot of work that has gone on there in the last year. I know there's been work looking at how a number of different standards, including passports, DERS, and WES, for example, integrate, but also really interesting to see FASP kind of building out and starting to look at potentially working with Discovery on things like Data Connect and so on. Okay, so I'm going to give it just a second longer in case anybody does have any questions just now. And actually, I think this is bringing us to the end of the work stream and FASP update session. So actually, if you have any questions for any of our speakers, now would potentially be a really great time to ask those. Okay, well, I'm not seeing anything coming in on Slido and I'm not seeing anything on chat. So I think I'm actually now just going to say thank you very much indeed to everybody who has presented on all of the work that has been going on in the work streams and all of the work that is planned for this meeting. It sounds like we're on course for an exciting 2 or 3 days. And we do have a question. I'm sorry, Max, you're not escaping. Max, you mentioned a demo video, but is there a sandbox to play with?
So the video we recorded is for a system that will be publicly released likely later this year. So the answer is not yet, but soon. And we'll definitely share that information with with people in the GA4GH community when that's ready.
That sounds really interesting. Thank you very much indeed, Max. Okay. Okay, well, in that case, once again, thank you very much indeed to everybody who has presented on all of the work. There's clearly been lots and lots of progress, which is, as ever, very exciting to hear about, and also lots of exciting sessions planned for this meeting. So we should be in for a good few days and hopefully a productive few days, which would be really wonderful. Okay, so I think at this point, we are going to move from the work stream and FASP updates through to a presentation from our Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Group. We have got Laura Paglione and Melissa Konopko presenting on this. Both Laura and Melissa have been involved in GA4GH for a number of years now. Laura has a background working with ORCID, which will be familiar to many people in science for managing researcher identities. She's been a contributor in our data use and researcher identity work stream and has now kindly given time to working in our Equity, Diversity and Inclusion group. Melissa, again, will be known to many of you. She was formerly a member of GA4GH Secretariat and is now working for Elixir. And we are thoroughly delighted to have Laura and Melissa contributing to this work. So they're going to give us an update on what the EDI group has been doing. So Laura and Melissa, over to the two of you. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Susan. First, we thought we would just give you a little bit of a tour of the last almost year and a half that we've been working on the EDI work. And if anyone has seen these slides from the plenary, they are different. So the first couple are similar, but we had held our first EDI meeting back in 2020 in May, and had a great brainstorm with the participants of that session that led to a lot of refinement and the decision to take an intentional community approach to addressing ideas of equity, diversity, and inclusion. And intentional communities really is an approach of being very intentional, but to think about what you want your community to be, and then systematically putting things into place in order to create and sustain that community that you want. And so there are a bunch of exercises that we went through to help figure out what that community is, what that should be, and where the gaps may be today, and then work on these pillars that are part of a book that we used for that analysis to build up, to think about how we would build and sustain that community. We had a survey at the 8th plenary in October. We had another one that just recently, which Melissa's going to be sharing the results of. And through that, we selected a couple of areas that we were going to focus on, mostly in the part of onboarding people, and so we created a program that was just released a little bit earlier this year to have a way to ensure that people that are coming into our community are feeling well-oriented and feeling like they can make contributions and don't have that sort of overwhelming feeling of not knowing kind of of stepping in the middle and not really knowing where things have been in the past. So that program launched recently. Thank you to the people who have participated in it so far. We're looking forward to great success with that, and we are starting the process of adding on more programs. Next slide, please. The work of equity, diversity, and inclusion is actually split across the EDI group, which really focuses on EDI and the teams, the people that are building out our standards, and then also in the work that EDI principles are reflected in our standards. And this is work that is primarily spearheaded by the RUSE group. And the first programs that we started to work on was this onboarding area, which I just mentioned, participation levels, which is the ideas of who is participating in leadership, in the speaking engagements, and then equity by design, which is about how we incorporate EDI concepts into the program, into the standards that we create. I mentioned the onboarding program, which is sort of an orientation, mentorship, buddy program for new members. The participation levels, you can see it reflected in today's meeting in the speakers that are there. Perhaps you've seen the new posts for leadership, from leadership positions that are open, and how that is, how it's been expanded in how we're approaching that. You can see like an evidence in sort of the AI and bias workshop that's coming up. This just leads into more programs that are related to ensuring that we have equity by design. Next slide, please. So as we were reflecting about the 1-year mark of the work that we've been doing, we were reflecting on, how much impact have we been able to do, and we recognize that any kind of change like this is a cultural and a systemic change. So it requires things like this require many simultaneous coordinated efforts, and in thinking about it, we realized that the EDI advisory group and the work that the RUSE group is doing is not sufficient to make a change. To make a huge impact, the huge impact that we're hoping that we'd make. Can I have the next slide, please? And in thinking about that, we're thinking about it in sort of these 3 tiers. At the base, sort of the core of what we're doing is ensuring that the community that we engage with is diverse. A lot of this has to do with which countries we're participating with and are involved in our work. And how deeply engaged they are in the work that we're doing and the standards that are being created. The next tier is around the people who are working on it, the volunteer diversity, ensuring that we have good representation in so many different ways, and not just in gender and perhaps race, but also in location, region, point of view, and in roles that these individuals play in their organizations. And then sort of the top layer is this inclusion piece, which is a lot of the work that the EDI group has been doing, which is ensuring that once these volunteers are engaged, that they remain engaged, and that they are fully able to participate in our work. Next slide, please.
So thank you, Laura. With all of that in mind, of understanding who is responsible for what and how we can make the biggest impact, we followed up from last year's EDI survey and tried to do another one this year, trying to get an understanding of who is involved with GA4GH and attending these meetings, what their experiences have been, and what the greatest changes are that they see that they can make. Before I get into the details of the results, I wanted to really thank everybody. We had 86 responses to this survey. It's a great improvement from last year. So I'm happy to see, because I know not everybody loves answering surveys. So actually taking that moment to fill this out really shows me that you guys are interested in seeing a change. You can also see that in the fact that EDI efforts have been mentioned throughout this meeting and the kinds of things that are going on. So I'm really happy to see it, because the only way we're really going to see a change if this effort happens across the community. So the very first question that we asked in this survey is, are you involved in GA4GH as you would like to be? And more than half of people who answered this said no, which means that there is a huge amount of extra effort that is out there that people want to put in, potentially in a way to add more diversity, but also just to have more work get done. And if you could click for me, please. One more. The reason why that people gave, and we were allowed people to select multiple ones, which is why you'll see those percentages add up to a lot more than 100%. But the vast majority of people said that the biggest issue that they were having is lack of time and support. And so this is something that if you are representing an organization here at GA4GH, and there's people who you have the ability to bring more into the conversation. There are people who could potentially be bringing more diverse ideas into GA4GH who are unable to due to lack of time and support. So if you have the ability and you understand the value in bringing the most diverse voices to GA4GH as possible, trying to take enough off their plate to give them that time and support would really be helping with EDI issues in order to create standards that support the global community. The next biggest issue that people had was time zone issues. And so this is something that can be worked on mainly by the work streams. I know some work streams have been really good about creating these rotating meeting times. Others have been unable to. Others have given it a try, found that they weren't getting the response that they were hoping for, that they weren't getting additional people. And so after just 1 or 2 meetings, closed that off. But if you think about having meetings set for a time that works primarily just for the US and for Western Europe over and over and over again, people stop paying attention. And so just briefly opening the door and then shutting it again is going to prevent people from potentially engaging. And so not only making sure that door is open, but continually reaching out so we get that broad engagement is going to be important. Now, the next 3 issues of I don't feel senior enough to contribute, I don't feel like my viewpoints or contributions fit, and I don't feel like my contributions are being considered, all kind of have the same feel. And there have been a number of people who have felt that way as well. And hopefully that's something that the EDI team can work on by creating some guidance for work streams in order to help people feel like they can engage better. Next slide, please. Now, since there are people who said that they would like to contribute more, for the most part, you can see in the purple and the green, people felt that they did understand how they could engage with the community. But there were a number of people who weren't sure or who did not know how to engage with the community. One way this is already being worked on being resolved, I know that Secretariat is improving the website to be more welcoming to newcomers and to make sure that information is available. But one of the issues that we seem to have is that it's clear you can join these meetings at 1-hour time slots that exist, but if you can't make the meeting, people don't really know what the best way to engage is in an asynchronous manner. And so you can see some of the quotes that we had from people here. Someone said, transition to online meetings has meant more challenging meeting times, but also more opportunities to contribute. So it's an overall positive change. And on the same page, but on the other hand, someone said, if you miss some meetings, it's hard to get caught up, perhaps having a better way to contribute and participate if you can't always attend the meetings. And so making sure that the work streams are clear about the ways to engage asynchronously and making that really transparent and easy to find, and also making sure that opportunity is available would help the more people engage. Next slide, please. So we also asked people if they felt that they were formally recognized for their contributions, and there was the most common answer there was strongly agree, and we also had a lot of people agreeing. There were a few people who disagreed or strongly disagreed, which meant that we need to make sure that there's really no one who's feeling very left out on this. If someone feels that they strongly disagree that their contributions aren't being considered, that's something we need to watch out for. But I feel overall, GA4GH seems to be doing very well on this topic. However, the similar thing on the other hand is we asked people if they felt like their contributions have been actively encouraged and considered. And while most people did feel that was the case, there's actually a really decent number of people who didn't feel that way. And in fact, we had a very helpful comment from someone saying it would be helpful if the leads of some of the groups actively sought participation from individuals on the call. And so this goes beyond the same people who usually are doing the work, who come in and they talk and then pass between the inner core. This is making sure the door is not only open, but you're actively putting a hand out and saying, we want you, like you can come in and give us some contributions. And in fact, the onboarding program that we're working on is a really great way to do this by having someone who gets to know newcomers and what their skills are. They can help call them out and say, we know that you as a newcomer potentially have the ability to contribute in this area, and we would like to hear from you. Next slide, please. And so this slide is not going to surprise anybody. I think we asked people what region they primarily work in, and the vast majority said Europe and North America. And just 22% are represented by that little slice in the rest of the pie there, which is the rest of the world. And so if we as a global organization want to represent the globe, then this needs to be a much more evenly sliced pie. We also asked people what sector they worked in, and the same percentage of people said they worked in academic and nonprofit research. And so everything else there, including pharmaceuticals and software and healthcare and government, and that was all the last in the 22%. And this calls back to what Laura was saying about creating an intentional community. We know that we need to represent the global community. So that top one should be spread much more evenly. But the sectors, understanding which sectors we need to be engaging with most closely in order to be successful, is something that needs to be determined, and a very distinct result set so that we can work towards that. If we decide that academic research is really all we want to be in, then this is fine. But I think in order for the work that we're doing to truly be successful is we need to be able to work closer with pharmaceutical companies and healthcare and governments in order to make the standards that we're having truly useful. Next slide, please. So keeping all of that in mind and the concept of the intentional communities, we asked people which underrepresented populations did GA4GH work to include next. The reason we asked this question is there's no way for us to approach this and say, okay, we want to now expand broadly. We want to bring everybody in, because there's no way that we would be able to make that sort of change, the classic boil the ocean metaphor. So if we can create a targeted strategy to bring in one group that we think can make the biggest impact now, and then continue piecemeal to really work on expanding, then we can do that. And you can see that the answers that we got here are as broad as you can imagine, but for the most part, the most common answers that we got were across low and middle income countries, in Indigenous populations, and in women. There were a couple of call outs for cross-sector work, but I think the most common answer that we got was across low and middle income countries. And so understanding what it is we need to do to encourage those groups to join us, be it time zone issues, or is it going to be some more of financial, or what is a great place for the team to start working on. And so Laura showed that board in the beginning of sticky notes of the projects that we are planning on working on. And so our meeting that is coming up on Thursday, which Laura will mention in the next slide, we're going to take all of this information, see the change that's happened from last year and what people want to focus on the most next, and use that information to decide how we're going to create our targeted strategy. Back to you, Laura.
Thanks. Next slide, please. So the next question would be, what can you do? And Melissa mentioned a bunch of things that have been working, and the first part is continue doing the things that you have been doing. But one thing that we definitely would like to do is ensure that we have your voice and your suggestions as we're building out the next stages of the EDI work. One thing that really struck me in the earlier presentations is when Andy said that your participation is definitely going to change the course of the work that the group is doing. And I think that that's the case here as well. The EDI work is not something that can be done by a group of people that are kind of off on the side. This is really a group, an effort that requires the input and the attention of everybody that's involved to ensure that we are getting the intentional community that we hope to have. So we invite you to come to our session, which is on Thursday. It's the first session of the day, which is, well, it's 8 o'clock Eastern, but I believe it's 12 UTC. And same time this full session started. And I put a link, I just hyperlinked to the one that is in the event session. But the things that we definitely would like to get input in, or what the next set of projects are that we are going to tackle, and to get to the communities that Melissa mentioned in her last slide. So with that, I will pause and see if there's any questions.
Well, thank you both very much indeed, Laura and Melissa. If you do have questions for Laura and Melissa, again, Slido and also chat. And I can see we have a couple of questions. I think one is possibly, no, 2 questions. I thought one of them was maybe just a comment. I'm trying to read tiny writing from a laptop screen here. But question number 1, bravo to the incredible hard work that the EDI group is doing. However, I see a lot of women doing the heavy lifting on EDI, and I would like to ask Ewan and Peter how we can improve allyship and get men, particularly on the technical side, involved. So I guess that's great to put that question to Ewan and Peter, but I mean, and it's also a great point. We have a large number of men. Clearly, it's going to take everybody in G4GH to get involved and support these efforts. It's not just going to be.
I would totally agree with that, and I think it would be. I think the question is well stated, that we don't want to see EDI to be a something, that is about women leadership. It's got to be all of us doing this to make us all inclusive for this. So I think the floor's open for men to join, obviously, and there's no need not to. But I think Laura and Melissa, I don't know if you want to talk about your working group as well, and how biased or not you feel that group is.
Yeah, I've spoken with a number of men on this topic from GA4GH, and they've tend to feel that they would be an intruder. And I want to say that you absolutely wouldn't be. And there's no way that we can make this happen unless the people who are primarily involved within the work, who are currently leading things, and in a lot of cases that does tend to be men, to be spending the time to learn how to make things more inclusive. And so we would absolutely love more people to get involved. And I know time is tight, and we're going to do what we are preaching in here and trying to make things accessible for people to join in the work, even if you can't attend the meetings. So if your time is tight, we are going to try and make an effort to make sure that it's available for you to work on whenever you have the moment to do so.
Go ahead, Laura.
I do think it's worth mentioning that there are several men, particularly ones that are workstream leads, that are participating in the efforts, maybe not in the day-to-day EDI creation work, but in ensuring that that work is being implemented in the workstreams that they're a part of. And the Ruse group has probably more even participation, but it is definitely true that if you look at a meeting of the EDI group, you'll see majority of women and very few men. And you look at the other workstream work, and it's the exact opposite.
we should do some proactiveness about that. And I do, in my own head, I think we've got these different axes. One is gender, one is this kind of English speaking, non-English speaking component, and another axis is nationality, or global north, global south axis. So I think we want to make progress kind of in this multidimensional space, and we will need engagement. So the challenge is valid, and I think
and I think
Susan, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say also nice though to flag that we mentioned that Ruse is perhaps more representative, but our EDI session on the third day of the meeting, I think, is scheduled in such a way that I think the only conflict is with consent. So if you are in a more technically focused work stream, the session coming up this week could be your ideal opportunity to get involved. And I think it's, it's really interesting. Melissa, I hadn't seen your slides before you presented them, but I was really struck by the extent to which they echoed some of the points that I was aiming to make, whether I succeeded or not, that really we need involvement from lots of people. We need to make it easy for people to get involved. If we're going to hope to see these standards get rolled out and deployed around the world as they need to be to fully realize the potential of genomics for health, they need to be applicable there. And for that, we do need to be welcoming people in it. And I was really interested in some of the specific points that you made, and it got me thinking again about the sessions that we have planned, looking at how standards development procedures work, but I guess also really something to be looking at in terms of concrete practical steps. And I was struck by you were talking about things like time zone issues. How can we improve asynchronous working? How should you be sending out summary emails after some of our meetings with just 2 or 3 bullet points to say these were the main outcomes to make it easier for people to stay up to speed? What are the other things that we might be able to do? How can we encourage people to make sure that everybody's opinion is being heard when they're chairing sessions? And also, I guess, something that goes out perhaps to managers involved in J4JH when they're thinking about which of their team members they want to have kind of come forward and participate. And also actually thinking a little bit about, I think the operations team in J4JH is always really interested in how we support people in contributing to J4JH and options for what funding might be available to support them and so on, so that if it is a challenge to get time, looking at how we can support those things. I guess moving on through the questions, the next one relating to the survey, 86 responses doesn't seem like very much. That is, I have to say, that the questioners' words, I have to say, having had experience of sending out surveys, 86 seems like actually pretty good to me. But I will take their point. 86 responses doesn't seem like very much. Would it be worth repeating, trying to reach a broader audience and encourage more responses? Any other ways we could gather more input? So I guess that kind of begs the question of what lists did we send this survey to, and any ideas from anybody on who else we might reach out to?
Could we put the link out in the chat? So if anyone hasn't had a chance to fill it out, now's your moment. And we're going to try and go over this information again at the meeting on Thursday. And so that'll give us a little time to go over the data again if we see that we've had a decent number of people respond as well.
Yeah, and I think this is probably twice as many as we had last year, or something close to that. So we're going in the right direction at least.
Okay, and really quickly, because I think we're approaching the end of time for this session. Somebody's pointing out the work of J4JH is rightfully focused on human, but a lot of the standards are used in many other scientific communities. And have we made efforts to reach out and engage with other consortia working on similar issues to get their input? So do we know if there are other scientific consortia who are successfully looking at or addressing these issues? Have we heard anything from them about what might have worked for them?
I would say that's probably outside of the remit of the EDI team. However, while it's important to make sure that we can do this, and I know the passports and AAI is being used much more broadly. However, if we try and create standards that do too much, you end up diluting their ability. But I feel like this is something that could probably be better addressed by Susan and Newman.
I can say that in the other communities that I participate in beyond genomics, the J4JH work is mentioned far more frequently now than it had a couple of years ago. So I think there may be some traction. I mean, albeit small traction, but I think that there's more, at least, awareness of this work in other communities.
Okay, well, I'm going to say clearly there's lots and lots to talk about here. So let's hope that we can pick this conversation up again on day 3 of our meeting. And again, once again, if you're involved in the technical work streams, this is ideal scheduling for you to come along and join this conversation. We'd love to see you there. We're now going to take a 10-minute break. We are due back in UK. It is going to be 3 p.m. when we resume in 10 minutes. I think the schedule this week is so busy that I'm afraid to say I'm limiting myself to one time zone because I'm going to get horribly confused otherwise. But you have 10 minutes to go and grab a cup of coffee. Once again, thank you very much indeed to all of our speakers and presenters. from this first part of the session. And please do hurry to put the kettle on and get back, because we have amazing talks from the Human Pangenome Reference Consortium, Phage and Seneca coming up in 10 minutes. So once again, thank you all very much indeed.